Okay, very good. And I'm going to welcome everybody this morning because I have on my phone says 8:01, my computer says 7:56, and my clock says 4 a.m. So we're somewhere in between all that. So good morning. I am Phil Brilliant from Brilliant Environmental Services, also from Continuing Professional Education Services, which brings us this free hot topic this morning. And as hot as this topic was about 6 months ago, and then it became boiling hot, and then it became steaming, and now it's kind of cool. It's kind of cooled off a little. It's a little tepid, and we'll see how things go. This is recorded. It will be posted up on our website at CPES.com. I will mute everybody real quick.
I just had it.
Okay, I have muted everybody. I'll ask Tony to unmute. You can unmute yourself. You can put your camera on. You can do what you'd like to do. We're going to try to keep the background noise down as Tony speaks. And we are very thankful that, Tony decided to join us this morning. He had some time on vacation and outside of New Jersey. He's got that golden tan going. But he said, you know what, my life is New Jersey. I better come back and, earn a living. And so we're glad he did. But, real quick, if you don't know Tony Russo, the president of CIANJ, the editor of Commerce Magazine, the CEO of Commerce Magazine, he's been in the industry probably longer than he'd like to remember. With days in the department, days in consulting. But as I always say, when you have somebody who's working real hard for you and they understand not just the industry we're in, but the job that it takes, that's an added advantage. And Tony does that, and also, always secretly has his degree in engineering from NJIT. So, at any given time, he could come back and start working for any of us, or start his own company if he's really crazy enough to do that.
Yeah, but I don't have a name like Brilliant. You know what I'm saying? Brilliant sticks out. So,
hey, come on, you're in New Jersey with a name like Russo. Come on. But with that said, we are here this morning to really talk about what has happened in the past 30 to 45 days on the A901, the dirty dirt side. And so, Tony, if you want to start on a generalization, I have on the side here, I have a copy of the law, and I also have my certificate, so I can pull those up and we can share as we go.
yeah, first, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Phil. Always a pleasure to work with you and your team. I know Jules is on. I'm not sure if George is on, and I know we have a lot of our members, but, let me just give everybody some context because I think it's worth bringing up how we got to this point real quick. I mean, this all goes back to Superstorm Sandy back in 2011, 2012, where, a lot of contractors, did things that in the state's eyes was not, up to par with the regulations and laws. So the State Commission of Investigation launched an investigation. It took a few years, called Dirty Dirt. And I think people get confused too, dirty dirt, whether it means contaminated dirt or whether it means are people licensed or where they following the rules. So I think they, the term dirty dirt was really an interesting way of describing it, but they presented it, and I remember because I was there, to the legislature back in around 2017, 2016, 2017. Senator Smith on the Senate side, I forget on the Assembly side. So legislation was introduced to say, yes, let's mimic what people do on the solid waste side, where people get this A901. And if you've ever been through an A901, it's a lengthy process. I mean, I've never gone through it personally. I know a lot of our members have, and there's a lot of information that you have to go through just to give you a perspective, and then we can kind of talk about it. If you applied for an A901 for the solid waste or hazardous waste, it's a 10-year look back. You have to do disclosure statements. You have to list your business partners. Do you have violations, civil, criminal? They go out, they look at all your employees, and it's not just the DEP, it's the Attorney General's office, it's the state police. So it's a process. So, and rightfully so, they said, well, geez, why don't we take that process and apply it to soil? And then hence the dirty dirt law that was signed in 2019. And then what happened? The pandemic happened. And then the governor, through an executive order, pretty much stayed all the requirements across the board. And so people kind of put it on the shelf for 2 years. And like Phil, you were saying last year, if you remember, everything started coming back up because in June of last year, the governor lifted the public health emergency. That started the clock again, all the statutes and regulations. Fast forward, the department needed registrations due by October of last year. We all got involved. A lot of people just weren't aware of it. They missed the registration deadline. I know the DEP launched a stakeholder process. They had a couple of meetings. Fast forward to this year, the deadlines were, February and April. It actually was April to submit your application, and a lot of people were concerned. So coalition was formed. I know a lot of our colleagues with BIA, UTCA, the Utilities Association. I'm going to forget a few, but everybody got involved. Because when you think about, soil and who touches soil, it's a lot of people, right? It's obviously all the people on this call, environmental consultants, but it's pool contractors, it's landscapers, it's land improvement folks, developers. So people are wondering, well, what does this mean to me? So there was a lot of confusion out there, and that confusion still exists. But what wasn't deniable and where we were fortunate, and I want to thank the department, and I want to thank Senator Smith and on the assembly side, Speaker Coughlin, because I think they understood it. When we went to them and we said, look, we have a situation here where, the deadline to apply for this license is coming before the rules and regulations are even out. So really people don't know what the rules are, but yet they have to apply for this license before. Can't we at least extend it? And it took a while. I mean, just to give you an idea, as simple as getting a 1-year extension or whenever the rules are finalized, it took a while. I mean, I started working on this in October, November, and spent some time on it. Now, fortunately, because if you're familiar with Trenton and how legislation works, there's a lot going on, right? With the state budget and other bills. But again, to the credit of the legislature and to the governor's office and to the DEP, they understood that, hey, let's try to give folks breathing room here and let them apply for the license after the department finalizes the rule. So I'm happy to report that on July 5th, last week, Governor Murphy did sign the bill. It was A4255, now known as Public Law 2022, Chapter 64. Now, the final law is not published yet, the chapter law, but it will. But if you look at the bill, it's pretty simple. It basically says the July 14th, which is tomorrow, if you're engaged in the soil business, you need to register. That's not changing. And I've gotten a few emails where people think that that's going to change, but that did not change. So my advice to everybody, if you think you're in the business, you touch it in any way, go ahead and fill out the 2-page form. There's no cost to doing it. You submit your information. I know Phil did it, and Phil could probably show his registration. That's not changing. So you have until tomorrow to register as a business that does work in soil, transportation, disposal, brokering, whatever you want to call it, you have to do it. So the registration is due tomorrow. What changed was, the real lift here is the application for the A901 license. And what the law now says is to let the department finalize the rules. Once the rules are final, everybody has 30 days after the rules are final to submit a full A901 application. Built into the law too is the Attorney General's office can give out extensions if needed, depending on the circumstance. So, some good news there is if you find yourself in a situation where you need an extension, even after the 30 days, you just have to work with the Attorney General's office in the department to apply for an extension. So really the work really begins, because I know a lot of the issues that we've talked about over the last 8 months are still on the table. I know we've had several calls with the department, and a lot of these issues hopefully will be brought to the table now that the stakeholder process will begin again. I don't know if there's anybody from the department on the call, but one of the things I'll do now that the law has been signed is circle back with Mark Peterson and his team, Janine, Mike, and figure out when the stakeholder process is going to be initiated again, because again, a lot of the issues still remain. So the good news is we do have a year, but get your registration in, and some of the issues still exist, right? And we've kind of gone through a few of these. I mean, again, the last couple of months, I've spoken to landscapers. I've spoken before land improvement groups. And a lot of these real life situations like, well, okay, I'm doing this kind of work. Would I be subject to it? And really the issue, right, are the same issues, and I'll go over them, is really there's a lot of consternation around who's a key employee, who's a broker, who's a salesman, who's a consultant, and are they subject to it? Now, Phil and I talked about this. The A901 is issued to the company, and it's a license to the company, but built into that license, you have to identify individuals that are key employees. What the law did, the Dirty Dirt Law in 2019 did, was expanded who those key employees are by including a broker, salespeople, and that again raised a lot of issues that we can kind of talk about as far as, and again, I've gone through so many examples over the last 8 months that it's complicated, right? If you're working for an LSRP, right, again, and that's an important thing I should point out, is that in the law, licensed site remediation professionals are exempt, right? But the company is not. And if you have colleagues that are not LSRPs, there's a question and some confusion out there as to whether or not, if you do it under the supervision of the LSRP, if you would be exempt. These are all the issues that have to be discussed between now and when the rules get finalized. And I think that's really where, I urge everybody on this call, when the process starts, make sure your voices are heard. And the hope is that, at the right time, we could work these issues out. And by the time somebody applies for this permit, I'm sorry, for the license, a lot of these issues will be clarified. Yeah, because it's interesting what I learned through the process. And again, it's not just the DEP. You're actually, I think, applying to the Attorney General's office. State police get involved. I think for every individual that you identify on a license, it's $1,500. We had one member that had about 15 key employees. So you could do the math. I mean, it's not an inexpensive license, but again, it'll take 12 to 18 months to get. And here's another stat for you, and maybe this has changed since I've spoken with the department about a couple of months ago, but I think they had over 700 registrations sent in. Out of the 700 or so, 65 folks applied for the license. The important thing here, and I can confirm this, but because now that there's been this extension, if you had an A901 application in for soil, they really aren't, they shouldn't be processing that. I think everybody is on the same page where they're going to wait until the rules are finalized before they process that. Whether or not you have to withdraw your application or, it's up to you. You could work with the Attorney General's office in the department, but just keep that in the back of your mind, because that's an issue I did raise with the DEP, that what happens to these applications if they already went in. And they said, well, obviously in light of what the law says, that they'll sit on the applications and not process them then. So I'll kind of stop there, Phil, because I guess we can get into some of the issues, but I want to get a sense from the crowd. And again, we can kind of keep this informal. It is basically, what are you seeing out there? Again, I don't have all the answers. Obviously, it's going to be dependent on what the department concludes, but hopefully this all works out at the end of the day.
So great. That was a great overview. I think a lot has happened. You kind of condensed that into 10 minutes, which was good. So take a little sip of water. And just a couple things I wanted to hit upon. I think one is that this exemption, and again, I kind of started pulling up, but I can't do two things at once because I'm just not that good. The original law still exists. This just amended the timeframes in that law. And the question of license. And remember, we had this conversation with Mike Hastry, and if Mike's on the call, I don't know if he is or not, I didn't look at names. But that will, I assume, be vetted out in rules, because his understanding of license and certified individual are people he regulates, which would just be LSRPs and subsurface evaluators. But when it comes to rules, I'm quite certain that the PEs of the world, the architects of the world are going to really comment strongly that there are other licenses in New Jersey.
Right.
So I think it goes back to the fact of the registration, which is due by midnight tomorrow night. There's no cost. There is no, I mean, I guess my question to you is, in this long-winded question, is there a downside? Are you putting yourself on a radar for some reason? You don't have to apply for the A901, but is the registration doing something that is putting you on some list that you might need to be concerned about? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question and a good concern to have, but I don't see the downside, Philip, because again, you're probably in their database already if you're doing work with them in some capacity. All this is asking is, look, when it comes to soil and how soil is worked or managed, register, right? So I don't see, again, there's no cost to it. It's 2 pages, you've done it, and they kick back the registration pretty quickly. Again, if you want to show your registration again, I don't see the downside to it at all. And quite frankly, I think it'll give the department some good information as far as the universe, the total universe of who's doing it. And then you can kind of take it from there and say, okay, really the spirit of the law, the intent of the law, who do we really want to make sure has this A901? Because again, it's supposed to, really the essence of the whole thing is to purge the criminal aspects of any potential, misgivings out there of contractors that are don't have any scruples and it's just dump soil here and there. And that's really the intent of it. It's not to go after the good actors, or it's more or less to make sure that if you're involved in this and you're a key employee and you own a company, because again, we could probably cover this hour, and I've gotten questions like, well, wait a minute, if I'm dealing with a licensed facility that's coming with their trucks and taking it back to my facility, am I exempt? That's a great example that probably cuts across everybody. And if you look at the FAQs, it's not clear to me. I think it could be clearer, and maybe this is an issue we raised to the department, but you're really not exempt, right? They're exempt because either they have the A901 license already, and then we go back to what is regulated and what's non-regulated. One of the things that I think is worth talking about is, and I know that the landscapers will probably take advantage of this, is this certification that was floated, right? So basically one of the, I guess, exit ramps, if you will, that the department offered in the FAQs that were dated back in March was this non-restricted soil and fill recyclable materials certification. So basically what they're saying is you make the decision as that business owner that if you think you're not involved in the regulated side of the world, then you could certify that you're not and not have to apply for the A901 license. I think the concern there is just make sure that if you do go that route of certification, that you keep the documentation. And again, this opened up kind of a Pandora's box. Well, what do you mean? Do I have to sample my soil then? And, it's implied in there that you just have to show proof, right? And that's really the rub. What's the proof that my soil, that I'm exempt from that pile? Because then I got questions like, well, what if I do one job where it's I'm exempt, but not another job? Well, then you have to apply for the A901, right? So these are all the issues that when you talk about reality versus the spirit and intent of the law. And again, it's no fault of anybody, but when legislation goes through, it happens at super speed that you really can't really vet this out. And that's why the legislature and the governor rely on the regulating agency to then take the law and say, let's do rules and regulations to kind of clarify a lot of these issues. And again, going back to it, I think everybody understood that if we were going to apply for the license before the rules were out, what's the point, right? You have to really give people an opportunity to understand what is it that I'm going to be required to do. And I think everybody got it to their credit. And that's why we got the extension. But, the certification is one thing that you have to make that business decision, but it's a good opportunity to say, yeah, okay, I'm pretty comfortable with who I deal with. I know where my materials come from. I think it's non-regulated or non-restricted. Therefore, I'm going to apply for the certification and be exempt from the A901 license.
Good coverage. I'm going to cover a couple of questions came in. Let's just hit those real quick. And I did post, Alex had asked, in the chat, I put the actual form that you have to complete. And I put the website the form comes from if you want to see. That also has the certification that Tony just talked about and some other Q&As and stuff. But the first question that came in, I think, is this is from Alan, We are an environmental company that performs soil and groundwater remediation. We always use facilities and transporters that have an A901. However, we are the prime contractor and subcontract these services on these projects. Will we need to also have an A901 license, or can we continue to operate in this manner? That's the hot topic.
Yeah, I think he needs to register.
Yep.
Right? I think we're all on the same page there. And then that's a good question, because if you're only dealing with licensed, again, and I'll read that one section here in the FAQs. Because I think this kind of applies to one of the phrases here.
Yeah, if you're only dealing with A901 licensed facilities, but the question, if you can hit this too, Tony, from the FAQs, what happens if you're a salesperson from that prime? Does that now link you in?
So if you go to page, and if you have, Bill, page 4 of the FAQs, I think this kind of addresses what Alan's point is. That if you're going to a class B and using their trucks, basically this is saying that the business concerns that deal exclusively with these materials are exempt from the requirements of the law. Now that goes back to, is the materials that he's talking about, are they restricted or non-restricted? So you're gonna have to do a checklist and say, for your specific projects, what's going on here? I'm saying that that kind of an example, Alan, will probably be vetted out during the stakeholder process and hopefully clarified. Because I don't know, but to Phil's point is, yeah, you need to register, but do you need an A901 license? Even though you're using trucks and the destination already has it, it's not clear whether or not you are exempt from applying, because they could still determine that you're a broker. This goes back to the whole broker, salesperson, consultant definition that was expanded. And there was the I mean, there's the distinction between the solid waste side, is that they brought in more people that could be subject to the license with these definitions, and that's the consternation out there.
Tony, just to go back to something, when we had met with Senator Smith and we started talking about this, one of the things we talked about was kind of bifurcating the process. And we kind of have a little bit of that because we're doing the registration now. And I'm not going to hold you to this, and hopefully nobody does. You know, we had talked about just have the companies register, and only if they need to, they go do the A901. In just your feel that you got out, and I don't know if you got a feel from DEP, do you think that's something that might actually end up in the rules at the end?
Like an enhanced registration, or?
Yeah, well, you're just enhanced registration. Maybe you have to do an annual report. Remember we talked about those things? If we couldn't get the change of the law, that just let people register, and then they're on your radar, so-called, and they could track what they move. Do you think that we'll have any movement on that, or do you think A901 is going to be the only answer?
That's a good question, Phil, and I hate to just kind of dismiss it, but my gut tells me it will be brought up. I know that the department was open to it, but at the end of the day, we have to go back to that law in 2019 and say, what is it that you're required to do? Okay. So I think personally, they would have to, if we move away from the A901 and go to some sort of an enhanced, that's going to require some sort of a legislative amendment, in my opinion, but I mean, that's just the thought.
Okay, a couple other questions.
Hey,
Brian
Phil.
came in. Someone say something?
Sorry, Phil. Hey, this is Bob Lippincott. I had a question. I'm not online, so I can't send a question, but I
Go
have
for
a
it.
question about the form.
Yep.
Okay. So the registration form, you asked an earlier question, and Tony, by the way, thank you so much for all the work you've done on this. It's been excellent. The question I have though is on the registration form. I understand the idea and the concept of just register now, and we'll work it out later. In the certification language, there's a statement in bold that says you're certifying that you are subject to this. And I'm not quoting it. I'm paraphrasing. Maybe you can pull that up and show that statement. But in sending the registration, you're basically certifying that you're required to submit the form later. Is the way I read it. Can you say something about that? Because to me, it seems like there's no wiggle room. Like you're by submitting this registration, you're saying, you're raising your hand. Yeah, I'm doing this. And that's part of the question is we don't know if you're subject, but this seems to lock you in that you have to do this full A901 later, regardless. Am I missing something there?
I'm not an attorney and I definitely don't play one on TV, but I think the language of that sentence has a couple of ways of getting out of it. I certify that this business entity is actively engaged in soil and fill recycling services as defined in New Jersey Senate Bill S 1683, which is the original one, as of the date of this registration. So to me, that's as of the date I do the registration, but could be different if the rules come out and say something. That's my interpretation. I signed it, and that was what I was hoping it meant, was that if the rules change what soil and fill recycling services are and or the registration, that I would be okay. I mean, I don't know if there's an attorney who wants to weigh in on that.
Phil, somebody's saying go up top if you move to the top of the form.
Yeah, on one of the stakeholder calls that we had internally, Tony, with you, I believe, there was a suggestion, and I think some of the folks on the call indicated that they were sending the form with a rider reserving rights about that.
Now, I will tell you, Bob, and I don't have the original form in front of me. This form has been updated because it does have the current date of tomorrow. So I don't know what that language was on the original form.
Yeah, the only problem with this
Well,
form,
I'm
now that I'm
talking about
looking
the
at it,
current form, that's all.
Okay.
yeah. By the way, if you look at the first paragraph, the last sentence, they didn't tweak that because it does say you have to submit a license by July 14th, which changed.
Which has changed, yeah.
Well,
Bob,
I think that's understandable. My concern is more that bold sentence that says you're basically certifying there under penalty that's described below that you are doing this, and I think that's the whole point of this, is that it's not clear. So it's like, well, just register anyway, just in case. But that's not what this certification says. It says I'm certifying I am doing this, and I am subject, and I will fill out something later. And so one of the suggestions on the stakeholder calls from a few of the participants was send in some type of clarification rider. That's potentially a legal issue. I'm not a lawyer either, but that's what our legal team is saying, and I think others have done that.
Yeah, I could see the concern, Bob, but I guess my just being involved with the legislature and also the department is I think there's a clear understanding that not everybody that registered is going to need a license. So, so I think, and I'm confident, and again, I'm always the optimist, that when the rules come out, that a lot of people won't need to get the A901. Because again, I think everybody's on the same page here, including the department, that they really just, because think about the workload, think about the tract and the cost. Again, they really want to go after, who's really involved in doing this in a way that could impact business throughout New Jersey when you're dealing with soil. Again, we could like kind of slice and dice here, but I'm confident that this gives you cover for a year to continue to operate without any repercussions. And I'm confident that at the end of the day, when the rules come out, not everybody that filled this registration is going to have to apply for an A901. I think everybody's on the same page there.
Right. And Bob, I don't know if it
I
gives you.
appreciate that clarification. I think that's good.
Yeah. And Bob, I just
agree with
pulled
that.
up.
I would hope that.
So I would say I just pulled up the registration that I received, and it does say this soil and fill recycling registration is non-transferable and shall automatically expire and become invalid upon either failure by the registrant to submit a valid and administratively complete application for an A901 required to be filled 1 month after, or a final determination by the department regarding the registrant's application. So to me, that says if I don't submit my A901, I'm done, I'm out.
Right.
Okay. That's really good. And I'd say for future stakeholder calls and working with the department, I guess it would be helpful, and I'm sure you'll keep this on the radar to make that determination a priority with the department, that they understand that's a determination that some of the folks that registered are going to be maybe a determination that can be made along with the rulemaking that's clarified that they wouldn't be required to submit an application. But I got my answer. Thank you. Appreciate the discussion.
I mean, I'll ask Tony, is there any attorney on the call that wants to weigh in? You can unmute yourself. If not, I won't put you on the spot on an opinion there, but we can go on with some other the questions. Unless Tony, you're going to say something else?
No, I just think, again, Bob, I get the concern, but, I'm the optimist. Like Phil, you just said it, this registration will expire when the rules are done. Everybody's going to have 30 days after that to make a decision whether or not you're subject to it. And I think we got to let the process play out.
Which actually opens up a question that I think someone put up there. So you're going to have 30 days from when the rules go final. So now we're probably in a rulemaking process right now. I'm assuming Janine has somebody working on this. Soon, hopefully there'll be stakeholder processes. You've kind of thrown out there a year from now. You're an optimist though. So, it could be 18 months from now.
Could be, sure.
I would think it'll be during this administration. So, so that'll be that. But you can't wait to the day that it goes final. Because 30 days is not going to give you enough time to do your A901.
No, and it's interesting, Phil, because I actually went through the exercise. I said, let me just kind of come up to speed on just how long it would take to complete an application. First, a lot of people may have to hire an attorney or a consultant to kind of go through it and prep it. There's a lot of backup paperwork that you have to provide. So this is not an easy application. It is like documentations, business partners, former business partners, bank statements, financial records. This is complicated. So make no mistake about it, you hit it right on the head. I think we ballparked it in one of our earlier calls that, hiring an attorney or a consultant to fill it out, take a minimum of a month. Because then depending on how big your company is, then it has to go through internal review. So yeah, you're right. And I'm sure we'll talk about it. But yeah, people should start prepping once they get an idea what the draft rules say.
Yeah, and I consider myself a simple man. It goes back, if I remember correctly, 10 years. Okay. I'm a business owner. Okay. So 10 years, I've had multiple partners. I've had a divorce because it's also personal that comes into play. I've had a bankruptcy. So, you think about it again, maybe I am abnormal, and I hope I am in that situation, but you have to think about that if you're the business owner. But then the other side of it is, since we don't have clear definitions, you can't just sit back and say, well, I'm the salesman for this company, I'm not going to be affected by it, because you might be. And then that goes back to the fact of, until you see the rules, are you doing an A901 for one person in the company? Or are you doing it for 5 or 6 people in the company?
Yeah, it's interesting, Phil, because you just highlighted a lot of the things that you have to go back, to look back, provide all this documentation. But what was clear to me, and again, I haven't gone through it, but a lot's going to rely on the investigators or the person processing the license application. It's going to be subjective, right? If you had one civil case, or if you had enforcement actions, the bank was saying, it's not clear to me whether or not somebody could just disqualify you and say, oh, you know what, you had an incident, you're disqualified from the licensing. I don't know, but that's something that between now and when the rules go final, we ought to kind of flesh that out and say, okay, if I have to end up applying for this A901, what's the likelihood where I can get it, right? Don't automatically assume that you apply, you're going to get it. Don't make that assumption based on what Phil and I just talked about, because again, it's not clear to me. And looking at how the application is processed, it's going to be totally subjective, I think. The
key really is going to be, if you're not part of the stakeholder process, you have got to make sure that you watch the stakeholder process and that you know when that draft or that proposed rule comes out, that's going to give you as much information as possible. You have to hope that that period between that and the final rule is at least 6 months, because you're going to need to start thinking about how you go about doing it. And I do have an A901 for solid waste. And I remember going through that, and at the time, I was divorced, and it was an interesting investigation. Getting a call and saying, why is this state trooper at my house, asking me questions about you? So, it does, depending upon the investigator, it gets involved.
Yep, I agree.
Okay, some other things, interesting question. Is DEP treating the registration for companies with multiple offices? Do you have to do separate registrations?
I don't think so, but
The only
unless
thing,
you're doing business under another name.
what I would say is, and I'm trying to do two things at once, and that's what I can't do. In this session, someone there?
Hello. I am. It's Sonia Ward. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just dealt with that recently. I'm with Tetra Tech, and we have multiple offices operating under different names.
Oh.
And what happened was that I put in a separate application because we weren't sure than our other unit. It comes down to if they all have the same parent name, then you only have to do the one application.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
So the
Sonia.
answer is, yeah, if you're doing business under another name, you might have to do separate registrations.
Jamie asked that question, LSRP still exempt? Again, the answer, appears to be yes from DEP. But, if you, and like, I'm an owner of a company, I'm an LSRP, I did the registration because I have other people who are my company who are not LSRPs. So am I going to have to get the A901? I don't know the answer yet. You see Andrew's question, Tony?
No, I can't see the chat. I'm sorry.
Oh, so that's okay. I'll keep reading. It's okay. I don't want to make you put your glasses on.
I'll put my glasses on.
No. That's okay. You're looking good without the glasses there. As a consultant collecting samples for clean fill analysis per SRP guidance on a closed site, I'll assume that the site with the final remediation document, which results exhibit clean below standards, would this require the consultant to have the registration to provide these services? The
Is that
question,
Andrew? Which one is that? So I can see the chats now.
that's Andrew's.
8:24 a.m.
Yep, no, 8:19.
8:19. Our LSPs, if they are handling soil disposal at a facility. Look, I would say yes, you're an LSRP. The language in the law is pretty clear. Black and white says if you're a licensed professional, you're exempt.
Right. So you
Doesn't
should-
get into whether you're retained or not. It doesn't get into that. But again, because think about the essence of what they're trying to do. They're saying that if you've gone through the licensing process, you've been vetted, right, by the state, because the code of conduct is like, you're not going to be a criminal actor in all of this. So that was the spirit behind that. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. So that's okay on my side as the consultant, but now the contractor who owns the site and wants to move the soil off the site, which is clean, are they then required to have that soil fill recycling registration in A901? Or would it be the facility or whomever goes to pick up that soil?
So the answer is, and again, I want to make sure we're distinct here. There's the registration and then there's the application. I think because they're involved in soil activities, they would need to at least register. But again, I'm not the department, and that's the qualifier here. You need to check with the department and say, here's my scenario. Do I need to register? I'm saying I think you do, just to register.
And Andrew, the tough part is you have 20, maybe less than 24 hours to register, because it's by midnight tomorrow night. So the registration doesn't cost anything, doesn't have a downside to it. And in that situation too is, I mean, if multiple people are touching the soil, and it goes back to your landscapers, your pool contractors, if you do the certification, then no. But if you don't do the certification based upon the quantity, Tony, right, you're going to be moving, the answer is you might need an A901 for the contractor, for the facility it's going to. And if you're the licensed professional, you're okay. There's still, until we have rules, there's unknowns. Register at your best chance.
So
Yeah,
the consult, all right. So the consultant should register too, then. I mean, just because they're a party involved then.
If they're not an LSRP, definitely. If they are an LSRP, it appears that the LSRP will be exempt. But if the LSRP delegates that to John Doe in their office, then that person is not an LSRP. So the company would need the A901, right, Tony?
Gotcha.
Yeah, but so I think the first order of business is whether or not you register, and it seems like a lot of people on the call still aren't sure whether or not they have to register. Right? I'm looking at some of these comments, and I would say, based on some of these comments, like I think it was Andrew, your last one about how, you sample, it's clean, it's at a closed site. But it doesn't really get into whether or not it's clean or not. It's, are you engaged in the soil business? If you are, you need to be at least registered. Forget about the A901, that'll come later.
And I'll get Roger
Bill.
what you say. Roger, what do you say? Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to say one thing, and this is not clear again until we have rules, but the Dana's question, if a firm has an LSRP, but another employee who arranges transportation disposal is not an LSRP, do they need to register and perhaps have a license? My answer is yes.
But again, the company registers, it's not the individual.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So the company
Yeah.
would, because the person who's not an LSRP
Right.
works
Right.
for that company. The LSRP will get the exemption, but the other person won't unless.
Oh,
the
yeah.
company. So
Yeah.
my answer is yes, you got to register.
Yeah, the company does. Yeah, absolutely.
Roger?
That was exactly. I sent ours in back in March of 2020. It took 18 months to get the registration.
I sent mine Friday. I got it Monday.
I sent it in and the state shut down for COVID. I mean, it literally happened at the same time. But we've been advised by council that, we should have finished the licensing applications. I have 6 of them ready to go. That, and we're just gonna sit on them for now because it's unclear. And, my staff actively does those tasks under my direction, with my knowledge or the LSRP retained for the site. But the key thing that people need to understand is that in talking to enforcement and the Mike Hastries of the world, they plan on start enforcing July 15th. And,
Right,
and
well,
they will
that's-
sit there and tell you, follow the money. If you touch the money, you're in. And
Well, Roger, I hate to interrupt, but I think you hit it right on the head, and it's an important point to bring up that if you register, you are allowed to continue to operate and do business until this is all done. That's, again, if you register, you can continue to do business as you've been doing it. To your point, if you don't register and July 15th, they start enforcing and say, wait a minute, you didn't register and you're engaged in the soil business. Yeah, you could be opening up yourself to some liability there.
exactly. Thank you.
But I'm sorry, Roger, but to your point about, and again, I'm not an attorney, but now that we've bought ourselves some time, I can't imagine the scenario where you would want to get these applications in for the licensing until it makes no sense to do it before the rules are out.
I'm just going to sit on them, and we know the forums will change, I'm sure. I'm on the stakeholder committee. I'll have an idea where this is going. And the meetings have been very good so far. They've been more open with these meetings than anything else that we've seen in recent memory. But exactly how this goes, none of us know. I think Janine McGregor, we know Mark Peterson's leaving, so who knows what'll happen at that level. But Janine gets some of our concerns. Judy Andraco's done a great job with the rule sessions. They've listened. There's, the discussions with the LSRPA is, they get our concerns and comments, and we're waiting for another site remediation policy document that'll update and incorporate all this. We haven't seen it yet. So, we're a long ways away. I think we're 2 years out before we see, rules
Probably.
promulgated
Sure.
easily at the rate that
Yes.
they're moving with anything else. So-
Tony's the ultimate optimist. But I want to go back to something, and Heather, I see your hand up. I'll get to you in 1 second. I want to go back to something Roger just said, and Tony, you kind of touched upon it. I mean, I'm a company. I do, tank work. I move soil all the time. I decide not to submit my registration tomorrow. I'm opening myself up to enforcement, to inspections, based upon the department's interpretation of what I'm doing. Correct? Because they don't know what I'm doing. They don't know what I'm doing.
Yes. Yep. You're absolutely opening up yourself to enforcement. And that was one of the things that we were negotiating the extension. One of the things that, they did not want to budge on was to get the registrations in by July 14th, which is again, the give and take here. And again, when you vet it, it's get the information in. You're probably in the system already. When you do reports and everything, it doesn't hurt to register, and hopefully at the end of the day, you don't need to apply. But yeah, you don't want to open yourself up to enforcement unnecessarily.
Yeah. So, okay. Heather, do you want to unmute yourself? You have your hand up.
Hey there, thank you. So I'm just kind of curious. I see some language about if it's for an LSRP, not for an LSRP. Is there going to be some distinction about, depending on the type of license, whether or not you'll need to be licensed for A901? I mean, is it that specific? Do we think?
Well, I think, and again, I'm not an expert in A901, but again, the license will go to the company, but listing the key employees or employees that would be approved. So in essence, if you're working for company A and there's 10 employees that fall under the definitions that are regulated, those 10 employees are going to be vetted and they have to disclose everything. And then, but the A901 license goes to the company and not the individual.
Right. I mean, my concern is that if they make some allotment for LSRPs, that that LSRPs are expanding our the work that we do. And I mean, typically at large companies, for example, we have waste experts that decide what kind of waste disposal will be done, and talk about it with the LSRP, but LSRPs are typically not signing waste manifests or things like that unless they're functioning as another part of the team member, but we're not signing them as an LSRP. So has anybody talked about that? Whether, here I see that in the frequently asked questions, right? But
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing, Heather. I think, again, we'll see where things go in the rules, but when the department was, and excuse the phrase, regulating by FAQs, they put out here, the LSRP and the subsurface evaluator had the exemption, but it said it should be noted that if another person is subcontracted to procure contaminated soil for or remove contaminated soil for a site, including a person employed by the same company, that basically that person was not exempt, if I remember correctly. The person is required to either file for A901 or file the form. So they distinguish the separation. LSRP, subsurface evaluator, had to be the person doing everything.
yeah, and I have a huge concern with this because in the past I've had companies ask me to write a letter or a statement saying that concrete X is not contaminated with compound Y, and sort of expanding the scope of this. And so I'm in terms of stakeholder meetings and so forth, this would be one of the things I would put out there is be careful. I want to be careful what I sign and certify or write up as an LSRP. And I'm not entirely a waste expert. I rely on other experts to support me with that. And so, yeah, I really don't want to be making decisions about waste, to be honest.
And as part of it, your license as an LSRP, you have the ability to rely on experts in other fields, and you're actually encouraged to do so. So I understand it's going to be something that has to be discussed, Tony, and how the rule, it's got to be defined better in the rules.
Agreed, agreed.
Charlene,
Phil,
oh, sorry, who's that?
sorry, this is Bob Lippincott. I just wanted to make a quick comment on that. I think the issue that we're going to have to really be careful about here is conflating the A901 with the expertise of dealing with these soils and understanding soil, chemistry and waste management. There's the A901 has nothing to do with a person's education and background and being able to make waste management decisions. It's about tracking. This is my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong. It's about understanding who's doing it and having a tracking mechanism and having an ability to know who is actually handling these materials and being able to track. If there's a problem, be able to trace it back to who it is. It has nothing to do with their qualifications. And I think that's a very important distinction to keep in mind.
Bob, that's a good point to bring up, because yeah, the A901 has nothing to do with your knowledge or experience in cleaning up sites. It just more or less, are you an owner? Are you a key employee? Are you, and by the way, tell us your background and what kind of business you've been in.
But if I could just add to that.
I would just add one thing about that. I'm sorry. The reason why being a licensed professional in New Jersey covers for this, to me, is because they have your information already, and that's really what it's about. So you've been, as you said, Tony, you've been vetted at some level, but they also they know who to talk to. That's why it's okay for an LSRP to sign off on this and meet these requirements, because it's not about the quality of the work. It's about who did it and knowing, being able to know who to talk to.
Right.
Yep, exactly. Did that answer your question, Heather?
Partly, but I mean, some of this tracking, it's going to be whether or not the waste is regulated or not, correct?
Well, when you say the waste, you mean the soil?
Or soil, yeah,
Soil.
that's right. Whether some of the soil is regulated as specific types of waste in terms of the tracking. And so those kinds of decisions, and this is where it came into play with me and another, actually it was a waste disposal company, is that they wanted written letters for construction debris, setting up different types of where it could be regulated or whether it was regulated or not based on certain types of impacts as part of their tracking process. And so I guess it partly answers my question, but the tracking is still, someone is making a decision as to whether or not that soil material is going under regulated and whether or not it's hazardous or non-hazardous.
I guess, Heather, the best way to answer that is, I think the department's pretty comfortable with how waste and materials are determined to be contaminated or not contaminated. That is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about regulating a person. We're talking about if it's an A901, they want to know who owns that company, what businesses that person's involved in. They want to be able to track that person doing business. What they're moving, how they're moving it, that comes under the existing programs. Did I explain that properly, Tony? This is really about, making sure that the people who are doing the work are A+.
Right. But again, under the umbrella of the company. Yeah.
Under the umbrella of the company. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So, Charlene, your hand must be really tired. It's been up for a little bit. You want to ask a question?
Actually, that was a perfect segue. I know we've been talking a lot about consultants, landscapers, LSRPs, but it's my understanding from conversations with the department, they also want to track the generators. So they see the sites, the developers that own the property that is going to be generating the soil and even receiving the soil as being engaged in the business of soil and fill recycling services. And we had a couple calls from clients last week that got a little outreach letter from the department, reiterating some of the FAQs So my question, I guess, to everyone is, are you reaching out to your clients and encouraging clients, particularly ones you know are going to be generating material for recycling in the next year or so, and encouraging them to register?
Well, that's a great question. And that goes, Tony, that goes back to what are the utility companies doing? I mean,
It's in terms of registering, yeah, they're probably,
they're
I
all
mean,
registering?
yeah. I mean, I assume that, Phil, but I haven't talked to any of them.
I mean, I don't know if George is on the call, George Nicholas. I know he had spoken up a couple times about JCP&L. I think JCP&L in New Jersey Natural Gas, I can't think of where he works now. And about whether they needed to, register or not and stuff. But that, Charlene, that's a great question. I mean, I personally haven't reached out to my clients, but now that you just asked that, I'm thinking about it because, they do a lot of soil movement on their own. I do a lot of oil company work if they're, doing piping upgrades or, I mean, they contract all that. That's an interesting
Look,
concept.
there's no doubt in my mind that, people that should register by tomorrow won't, right? So,
Yeah.
and not because of any malicious and that, just because they're not aware of it, they didn't understand it. It's just a reality, but I think, yeah, as many people could register, and maybe that's something that we could address with the department is some sort of grace period, but right now the law says, yeah, by tomorrow, you have to register.
Interesting.
I mean, again, Phil, in my journeys and talking to all these groups, and I get it, a lot of people, for whatever reason, they're small staffed and they're out in the field all the time. They're not catching up on emails or alerts, and maybe they don't belong to groups. And so they're not even aware of like, what exactly does this mean? And why do I need to do it? And it just, again, I lived it when it went through the State House. And, it goes so fast that nobody could really predict when the consequences of that law. Like, okay, now the reality starts sinking in and you get all these scenarios. And quite honestly, these are questions that I'm sure the department's been asked, and they're going to have to vet them. And we're going to have to go back and forth with them during a stakeholder process. My hope is that it's going to be such a robust stakeholder process that a lot of these issues get clarified. Now, whether or not we're going to like the answers, that's a different story. But, maybe a lot of these issues get clarified that way, but all good questions.
So two things, and then I want to ask you a question. We're getting close to 9 o'clock. If somebody submitted their registration and it was approved back in 2021, they're good. They don't have to do anything further.
Yep.
Okay. Again, yes, the application for A901 is, I can't say that word. It's rigorous. It is time consuming. Yeah, the owners will go through a personal background check, business background check. So you have 50 plus owners. I would recommend hiring a bunch of attorneys.
Well, and just a couple of things there. And he uses the word owners, but it's more than just owners.
Right.
And that's what caused a lot of problems. It's more than just, it's up to that company to identify, according to the law, again, broker, consultant, salesperson, whether or not those people are key people. And that's the issue. But yeah, so do the math, 50 times 1,500, that's not an inexpensive application.
Right. And it's also something too, the registration costs nothing. The application literally takes a minute.
And wait, do not submit an application. Let the process play out.
Yeah, definitely. Don't submit the A901 application.
Yes.
Do the registration application. And the other thing that may come out of it too is that people are going to change their business models.
Sure.
There might be things you do today that you don't do when the A901 rule comes out finally.
To me, the registration allows you to continue to do business like you've been doing.
Yeah.
Right. And it just, again, like you said, minimum a year to 2 years. But again, things can change in Trenton where if they want to expedite it, but they'll go through the stakeholder process.
So it's 9 o'clock and I want to hit you on that thing. Things will change in Trenton. It's the middle of the summer. I think we're almost the middle of July now, believe it or not. We do know that August 1st, we will have a new assistant commissioner. Any thoughts on where we're going? Do you know it? I mean, I know you can't give us any trade secrets you might know, though you didn't learn anything in Cancun last week. But how do you think it could change based upon how Mark has been the past 9 years?
It's a good question, Phil. And obviously, I've been around long enough. I've seen a lot of assistant commissioners, Irene Kropp, Sue Boyle. I mean, to me, yeah, when, it's a people department, right? At the end of the day, you're dealing with people and people have different personalities. Again, I think the discussions have been productive. I think it's up to us to educate and inform them of our realities, right? And we need to make them aware of why this is causing a concern, and hopefully they see it and say, okay, I get that. Let's take care of it where, it's that happy medium. So I think, yeah, it's definitely with Mark retiring, it changes the dynamic a little bit, whoever the new assistant commissioner is going to be. I'm sure Janine and Mike Castro will be involved and some other folks. And we've been through it, Phil, you and I, for how many years? I've seen these stakeholder processes go quickly. I see them go long. I see the rules come out and then everybody provides comments. We win some, we lose some. That's just the nature of the Administrative Procedures Act. But, shame on us if we don't continue the vigilance and the diligence that we've done, to make sure that a lot of these issues, because here's my hope, is that at the end of the day, Phil, when the rules are done, a lot of these folks that touch it in some sort of way, don't have to apply for an A901. Because I don't think the department wants it. I don't think the state wants it, because then it's a resource issue where now you're going to have to issue all these licenses. And to what end? I think that's why we're in a good spot now to at least have the discussions.
Yeah, and I think Mark has made himself and his staff very available over the past 9 years. I hope whoever is a new person continues to do that.
Well, here's a good question, by the way, from Charlene.
I saw that question. I was gonna answer.
The answer is yes. Yeah. Even if it's July 17th or 18th, you're gonna miss the deadline. You could be rejected. I know back in October, one member submitted it past October 7th and it was denied.
Yeah.
And honestly, you're gonna have to just go through it. What you don't want to do is not register.
Yeah. I would tell you, I think you should register, my personal opinion. And, but if you register after the deadline, I would be shocked if they approve it, because, Mike Hastry's ready to enforce. He was ready to enforce when we had a call a couple months ago. And I think he's probably disappointed today.
Look, Phil, and what I would say about that is if, you get denied, have a good reason as to why you missed the July 14th.
Yeah.
Right. I always, want to give the department, some, credit. I mean, again, being a former DEPer, again, they understand that things happen. You just kind of have to build your case as to why you missed the deadline. But I agree with you, Phil. They're going to say, well, geez, we've moved this deadline now 3 times. And by now you should have been aware. And that's why it'll be interesting in your specific situation as to why it wasn't.
Yeah, I didn't feel the love and support from Mike Hastry. So, thank you everybody for joining us. Greatly appreciate it. This will go up on our website. I think it's a great recording. I think we covered a lot. Hopefully we gave out as many answers as we could, Tony. I think, but there's a lot we still don't know yet.
The work has just begun, in my opinion. I mean, the last 8 months, we got ourselves some time here, and now we really have to get together. And through CIANJ, if you're not a member, we'd love to have you as a member. We have a very robust environmental business council. Obviously all the other groups too do a great job, and we'll keep the coalition going. I mean, I think we have up to 9, different groups that are in this coalition. So I think we're going to have it covered.
Yeah, and definitely, I will back what Tony said. I mean, you should be a member of CIANJ. Not only are you going to get the up-to-date information, but I said it when we started today, and I'll end with it. Tony understands what we do every day. So when he goes to bat, at DEP or somewhere sitting in Senator Smith's office, he understands, the rolling up the sleeves, doing the work. And so it really helps us because, we can't always be in those places to say what needs to be done in the industry. So, Tony,
Right.
Thanks for your
Thank you,
time.
Phil.
Thanks for all your energy. Everybody, this will go up on the CPESNJ.com website. And that is